Hello, Internet, and thank you very much for tuning into this another episode of Cloud Native Islamabad workshop. And today we are covering OpenFeature. Let me give you the brief introduction of what we are covering today and brief about myself. My name is Saim Safdar. I am a co-host and the co-founder of the Cloud Native Islamabad and the co-host of this Cloud Native Islamabad workshop. And I'm also recently announced as the CNCF ambassador, and that's a very proud feeling for me right now. But let's start the agenda today. A guided tour of open feature. Feature flagging and feature management are critical component in the effective delivery of cloud native applications. They enable product delivery and SRE teams to turn functionality on and off at runtime without deploying new code. In this workshop, you will learn why and how you should implement against the open standard open feature and how to build, deploy, and manage your first feature. And let me introduce our speaker for this workshop is Adam Gardner from Dynatrace. Over to you, Adam, and give a brief intro of yourself and we start the workshop.
Hey, same. Wow, that's an intro. Thanks, man, and congrats on the ambassador. We're in me too, and we're in very high company. Let's say it's an honor to be recognized. So yes, absolutely. I'm Adam Gardner. I'm from Dynatrace, but today we're talking about OpenFeature. So I couldn't have said that any better if I tried. Feature flagging is a progressive delivery technique, as you say, that really allows teams to be a lot more flexible in the way that they're deploying code, and how they're progressively delivering that code to end users. So it used to be that we only had the ability to do deployments, and if you had version 2 or a different version, you had to do a different deployment, and therefore you had to have two sets of infrastructure. Feature flags allow you to be a lot more granular in the way, but feature flags can bring vendor lock-in, and other concerns that OpenFeature addresses. So with that, a couple of slides, and then I'm going to dive straight into the demo, because I know people like live demos, and then I'll flick back to the slides just to kind of wrap it all up. So hopefully my slides work.
Yes, Adam, I can see your slide, so you can start discussing it. So I will be in the background learning from you, and I'll ask question if I can see them on the YouTube chat or if I have any question on my side as well. Over to you, Adam, and just get start.
Awesome, thank you. So what is a feature flag? Every feature flag explainer that I've ever seen starts with this. It's an if statement effectively. So in this case, is this user a premium member? If no, they get version 1. If yes, they get version 2. But actually, when you dig into it, it gets a lot more complicated, very quickly. So in this example, because we're running in the real world, it's not just a simple case like that. You actually have user contextual data like their email or their login or their physical location. So the choice really gets to be like this. Is the user a premium member? No, they get version 1. Well, yes, they are, but where are they? And maybe you want, the European folk to have one layout and one color, the US folk to have another, and Australian folk to have another, and so on and so forth. So you can imagine building that as if statements in your code would quickly get very difficult and very time consuming to maintain. So feature flags really are a very complicated environment variable, if you want to think of it that way, and an if statement. And there's a couple of words that I want to kind of dig into here that you can target, update, toggle in real time from outside the app without a redeployment. So there's a lot there, but basically what it means is it's taking all of that decision making and moving it outside of the application so that you're separating the concerns, and at runtime, you can just run one version of the software and kind of play around with the capability at runtime. So what that actually means is that you can do things like progressive delivery, because you can deploy one version of the application and then at runtime segment that to say, well, this set of users gets a certain behavior and this other set of users gets a certain behavior. But the key thing there really for me is that if and when things go wrong, you can undo that very quickly. You don't need another redeployment. So let's, as I say, let's jump straight into the live demo, and then I'll come back and hopefully this will all be explained. So what you're seeing on the screen now is an in-browser Kubernetes cluster. This demo, by the way, is free for everyone to use. I'll provide all of the links at the end, so don't worry about screenshots or anything. You can see on the left, you walk through the tutorial effectively to explain all of this. So what we have is our application. Let's just refresh everything. And you can see, of course, the application is currently blue. And when I click this middle button, the application calculates the Fibonacci number to a certain number of places. In this case, the 40th place. And you can see it took 4 seconds. So our developers think that's too slow. And they've actually developed some new functionality, some new algorithm. Now, they have deployed this. It's already in the application. But I can't use that, of course. As you can see, I'm still on the slow version. But they have a hypothesis that the new version is faster. So how do we do this safely? How do we test this out at runtime without affecting everybody? Well, that's where feature flags comes in. So the key thing here is the functionality is already deployed, but no one can use it. And that is actually very powerful, because you've instantly separated the concept of a deployment, which is the physical act of delivering the code, from the act of a release, which is when a user can actually use it. And that obviously can give you a shortcut to continuous deployment. So feature flags can be a shortcut. So let me show you the pods. Open demo, get pods. Okay, so this pod is 33 minutes old. So just kind of remember that figure in the back of your mind. As I say, all of this is at runtime. We're not expecting any downtime. So let's change the behavior of this application. And we do that via feature flags. So I can show you the feature flag configuration. So the feature flag has a name called end-to-end. It's deployed in a namespace. And then actually, this feature flag configuration has multiple flags. We have one called new welcome message. It is enabled. And there are 2 variants. Now, this is what we humans decide on. So in this case, we've got 2 variants, on and off, and they obviously refer to true and false. Now, the default variant in this case is on. In other words, when our application asks for, please get me the value for the new welcome message flag, OpenFeature is going to go through here and say, okay, well, I've got 2 possible variants. Which one is enabled? It's true. So OpenFeature is going to return back to us true, which our application can then use in whatever way it sees fit. Hex color has exactly the same idea. It's got some variants with If you can read, if you know what hex is, these are hex values. But there's a weird looking one here called yellow, which is actually the word yellow. And I'll get back to that in a moment. But at the moment, the default variant is blue. So of course, that's why our application is blue. Now let's have a look at the fib algo, the Fibonacci algorithm. This one, every user is getting the recursive algorithm, except there's a targeting rule down here. Now, this is another feature of OpenFeature that it allows targeting rules. And the way to read this is if the user is logged in with an email address containing @fas.com, they get a different algorithm. They get the Binet algorithm. And that's our theory. Is the Binet algorithm faster or slower? And how do we, safely start testing that? So what I'm going to do is open a private window. And of course, I'm still logged out. But if I log in with any old adam@fas.com, you can see I get a much, much faster response time. And actually, I forgot to apply the flag, so I'll explain what's going on with the color in a moment. But I get a much faster response time than those that are logged out. That is feature flags working in my application, because I've now progressively delivered one version of my application to one subset of users and one to another without having two deployments, without managing two deployments. I've still only got the one pod. So I'm going to take a quick break if there are any questions that have come in.
No, no, it's great. Great way to describing the power of feature flag as well. So actually, I think right now some of the people like me, as I'm learning this, there is in Kubernetes there we have ingress controllers. Now we have a gateway APIs who can actually give you the same functionality. Now people thinking at this moment of time, if they're watching this session, how do I actually able to use this same functionality inside a gateway API?
That's a very good question. So let me answer that in a slightly different way, because feature flags and OpenFeature are obviously technology independent. So whether you're running on Kubernetes or you're running on-prem, feature flag methodologies will work. You don't need a gateway. Of course, like everything, there are different ways to tackle the same thing, but it's just a different way to do it. And this would work on your Kubernetes cluster and on a VM, for example. Of course, today I'm showing the Kube version, but I think that's part of the problem. We try to solution things, but then we kind of get stuck because we don't have the technology in other spaces. This is standardizing that ability across deployment technique. I can't think of the word, but across environments, it doesn't matter whether you're on-prem in a VM or in the cloud on a Kubernetes cluster. You can still use this same functionality. I hope that sort of answers in a suitable way.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Go ahead, Adam.
All right, cool. So yeah, let's dig into how this actually works. So if I show you the end to end, this is actually our YAML files for the deployment. Scroll up a little bit; it's a bit big. So I just took the feature flag configuration into a different file for ease. But you can see we have the namespace for our demo. We've got our feature flag configuration that you've already seen. And then we've got a standard Kubernetes deployment. Nothing fancy about that. Now, the question becomes, how do those feature flags become available for our application or our pod to use? And what we've done in this demo is there is an OpenFeature operator, and then we annotate our deployment pod with two annotations. You can see here openfeature.dev enabled. So that's kind of saying, yes, we want this deployment to be ready for feature flags. And then the second one, feature flag configuration, you'll notice it says end-to-end, which is, remember, the name of our feature flag. What that does is the operator will spin up a sidecar and basically read a feature or look for a feature flag called end-to-end, read it, and then make it available to our application. So that's how technically this is working behind the scenes. So let's do something with our application. Let's actually change the color of the application for a certain set of users. So forgive me, this is probably going to get a little bit small. But what I'm going to do is add the targeting rule to the hex color. Now, you actually saw this before. So when I logged in, let me flick back here and show a little bit bigger. When I logged in, you notice that I got the red version and everyone that was logged out got the blue version. And that's because it had a targeting rule I was playing around before that looked like this. So hex color, remember, everyone gets the blue version. But if you're logged in with @faas.com, you get the red version. Now, let's explore something else about OpenFeature. Let's do this. Let's just say that everyone gets the yellow version. Okay. So my intention there was for everyone to get the yellow version of the application, but instead we've defaulted to the black version. Well, what's going on there? So if you look at the actual code behind this demo application, OpenFeature offers a concept of hooks. And this is a way for developers to hook into the lifecycle of an application at runtime. So I'll kind of walk through this. This is our standard OpenFeature call to get the string value for the hex color. And you'll notice we've provided this 0000 hex color default. Now, if you know hex, that is black. So the way to read this, the developer is basically saying, okay, after the flag has been retrieved and evaluated, validate that whatever is being returned to the application is a valid hex color. And if it's not, throw an error and use black instead. Now, this is a really powerful concept because remember, the word yellow is not a valid hex color. And in reality, you're going to have two different teams managing this. You're going to have your SREs deploying the application, and then maybe the marketing team are the ones creating these flag values. So the marketing team doesn't understand maybe what a hex value is, so they just write yellow. This is a way to wrap a safety net around that fact and say, you've done something wrong here. We're just going to have that final little check and default back to black. Of course, the other way you can use these hooks is to push a message into Slack, for example. So after a flag is evaluated, let's notify someone in Slack that something has happened. As I say, as the developer, you're in control, in charge of writing this hook logic if you need it. Any questions? Same. Anything came in while I've been waffling? No? Okay, I'll carry on. So everything I've said is very interesting, but really, where does OpenFeature come into this? Because you can do all of this with feature flags. So what benefit is OpenFeature bringing to the table? Well, the hooking mechanism is one, but think about the world without OpenFeature. Okay, you've got obviously your application. By the way, Sam, are you still seeing the slides?
Yes, yes, Adam, I can able to see it.
Cool. I just when I'm full screen, I always panic that it's gone. Okay, so yeah, without OpenFeature, you've obviously got your application, and let's imagine that you have decided to write your own in-house feature flagging solution, a back end of some description. Now that could be as simple as an API layer, looking at a JSON file. It could be something like a database. But conceptually, you've got that. You've got your application talking to whatever solution. And that's perfect, and it works. There is nothing wrong with that. It works today. But that arrow between them actually hides a lot of technical debt for the future. Because what you've really got is your application tightly coupled to your feature flag backend. Your application is littered with code that talks directly to your backend system. With OpenFeature, you can break those dependencies apart and give yourself future flexibility so that you can start on an in-house backend system. And then if you outgrow that, just like OpenTelemetry, if you outgrow Jaeger, you can easily move to a vendor solution like Dynatrace because everything is standardized. So everything talks the same language. That is precisely what OpenFeature is trying to do. So with OpenFeature, the picture looks like this. You've got your application again. Your application talks to the OpenFeature SDK. We saw that before in that standard get string call. That never changes. So that's a really important part. You write your application to talk feature flagging once, and you never have to change it again. So then obviously the question is, well, how does that get string value get translated into, my custom backend code that I wrote and only I know? Or how does that get string value or get object or get Boolean translate into a vendor specific code? There's got to be some component that's doing that magic. The component is called a provider. So a provider takes the input from the SDK and says, Adam wants to retrieve a Boolean. Okay, well, this is a LaunchDarkly provider, for example. So it knows how to go and talk to LaunchDarkly. So there's that middle layer. And what that means is the only thing you need to do to change the feature flag backend is swap out the provider and everything else remains the same. So you've become a lot more independent and a lot more standardized with your feature flagging implementations. So I'm going to pause there. That's a lot of information, and that's a really key thing about OpenFeature. So were there any questions on that? Same.
Yes, Adam. I have a quick question regarding. I think imagine there are tools in the ecosystem who might use open feature to do these kind of stuff as well. One of the tool I know, let's say if we are using Captain project, and Captain give you the SRE, DevOps, those words. So if we are using, let's say, Captain today, how do those open feature work with Captain today? Or where actually we create a hook with Captain and open feature and do these kind of stuff?
Yeah, yeah. So that's actually a very interesting use case and something I was talking about yesterday. They obviously Captain and OpenFeature are addressing completely different worlds in one respect. One is, SRE and DevOps, and the other is feature flagging. But you're right. There's a tie in there. So imagine the Captain Lifecycle toolkit as you're deploying your applications and you're running your pre and post deployment checks. Well, if one of those checks fails, can we automatically toggle a feature flag on or off based on the health of the application? So that's kind of the tie-in there between projects. Um, Typically, though, where people start with open feature is either they're not doing feature flagging at the moment, or they are, but they're starting to build their own back end systems. And to avoid the scenario at the top here where they build it all and it works fine, but sooner or later, just like tracing, people start on Jaeger and then they realize, it's open source. There are limitations or rule-based access controls that we need to a vendor solution for, or we just want to move away from Jaeger for whatever reason. It's exactly the same scenario. It's just giving yourself that flexibility, and then obviously you layer in things like hooks, and it gets a very very powerful. But yes, I would love to explore with the community how we can have open feature built into more and leveraging more projects to give us these interoperabilities between tools. I think it's a really exciting area.
Yes, and one more question on the same line. We know there's a Kubernetes, we have a health probes. When you're talking to the container, you create a health probe to let the application know that the container is running or not, and then you drive the outside word to that container and that pod. Do you is there a possibility we can add feature flag inside health probes?
Wow. That's a cool idea. I don't see why not. I'd love to look into that. Yeah,
Yes, that's
nice
definitely.
idea.
I'm actually thinking, thinking on these points the line. Also, do you think like in Kubernetes, if OpenFeature become a standard, going if OpenFeature become a standard in future, and we hope so, it's become one. So, do you think if Kubernetes community can accept that and be available in the Kubernetes as a native feature flag or standard, and then people can build on top of it? We see there's a lot of standard in Kubernetes. There is gateway API coming up recently. Now the WAP coming up in the validation policy admission. So standards are building up. So if you think like Kubernetes can adopt this open feature built in, and you can add your vendors and who can actually do the logic of feature flagging.
I, again, I think that's a really, really important and powerful idea. And that made me think of something else actually, which let me see if I can pull the docs up. So open feature, open telemetry. See if Google does the job. So you're absolutely right. The point of the Open Feature project, obviously, I've shown one today. I've shown the Kubernetes implementation, but there is a flag D daemon, which is basically open source ready made flag evaluation backend with an API that you could use if you're running on VMs or on prem or something. The point of the Open Feature is it's an open specification. So even if you don't like anything I've shown, you can still come along and build your own tools, much like OpenTelemetry. And in fact, OpenTelemetry as a project has already adopted the recommendations and the output of the open feature specification. So when you're pushing observability data, OpenTelemetry themselves say if you're pushing feature flag information on your traces and spans, here are the recommended attributes and what you call them. So absolutely, OpenFeature is existing to be that bridge and be that standard. Yes, can completely agree.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's I'm actually looking into it in the future as well, because otherwise there's a hustle of learning curve behind the feature flagging, and then there's a fight between the dev and ops people. Like, do not use this tool, prefer this one. I'm don't like that. So remove the fight button. So going on, if you have any demos to please share.
No, I've actually. How long do we have left?
We have 10 more minutes left.
Sorry, you dropped out there.
I'm just saying, like, we have nine-ish more minutes we can before we wrap up.
Okay, cool. So I won't have time to show any more full demos, but yeah, just to recap, the why open feature, not just why feature flags. Well, it's all, as we've discussed just now at length, it's all about standardization. Standardization really, and an easy future path, as you've just said. If there are arguments, you can easily swap out that provider for that backend. So you can try it literally with a one-line code change. It's a call like set provider, my in-house provider, change that to set provider vendor X. So you can really easily and quickly play around with this. So OpenFeature does for feature flags what OpenTelemetry did for telemetry data in a nutshell. Let me actually show you. Hope that's big enough. Let me just pull this out into Notepad because my screen, the habit of making things small. Obviously, conceptually, what you do in your application, if you were writing the application, you get an open feature client in whatever language, Java, Node, JavaScript, Python, etc. And then this is the call, the set provider. So this is the line that says, okay, I want to use my in-house provider. And then on day 2 or 6 months later, when you decide you don't like what you've built and you want to go to a vendor, that is literally the only change you need to make. And everything else, these feature flag client get Boolean value, everything else remains the same. So that's kind of, as you're writing the application, that's what you would be writing. Cool. And very last thing from me, I suppose. Well, 2 last things. I said at the beginning there were multiple ways to get started with OpenFeature and really play around with this. So number 1 here, and I can send these links, so don't worry if they're a little bit too small. Number 1 here is what I call the 30,000 foot view. So that's if someone in your organization or team has never encountered feature flags, if you just want to play around and kind of get the power of feature flagging and open feature, start with that demo there. Then, of course, if you're technical, you'll probably want to start building your own back-end system. You'll be like, yeah, cool, let's go and code something. I would highly recommend that you explore FlagD, which I've referred to it before, but that's the back-end system, the reference implementation that the Open Feature project provides. Now, of course, as we've said, you don't have to use FlagD. You can use a vendor, you can build your own. But if you want to see how it is done well, and it's done right, or if you just want to use it, you know, it's a bit like Jaeger. It's a tool that you can choose to use. So that's the second tutorial. What is FlagD? How does it work? How do I run it, etc. Of course, once you've got your backend feature flagging system running, so you're able to store flags and retrieve flags and evaluate flags, then you're going to need to learn how to instrument your application. And Pete Hodgson, one of the governance board members, very, very generously has written a blog post and donated the blog post that I then turned, or Pete and I turned into a Killer Coder hands-on demo that really steps you through, and you will instrument a Node.js application with OpenFeature. So if you're a coder, you know, you're really going to start to understand then how easy this and like how it works. So that's the third tutorial. And then the fourth tutorial is the one we've ran through today. So that is the Kubernetes native, everything managed as custom resources. That's precisely everything that I showed on the screen today. And then, of course, if you've got questions, if you get stuck, the community is there, the OpenFeature community link. That it directs you to a Slack channel that has not only all of the OpenFeature people in it, but all of the vendors as well. So you've got your Split and your LaunchDarkly and your everyone who's ever developed an in-house vendor. So really, that's everyone available to you in that Slack channel. And with that, I am all done and out of words, same amazingly.
Oh wow! Thanks, Adam. Thank, thank you very much, Adam. It's been a wonderful discussion. I especially like the demo that you showed on the Killer Coda side. It's really reflect the need of the open feature and the standard like this. I think that the way I see all these demos and all these things that we covered is like a combinations of tool. We have a same tool in the ecosystem that give you that actually take the burden from you, so you can use your own DevOps tooling behind the scene, and you can actually change the provider and do the DevOps thing and the SRE things. That's Captain. Then we have inside the Kubernetes, we have gateway ingress APIs that actually give you the canary rollout, role-based deployment, all these kind of things. And then there's a feature flag that actually decoupling your code from this kind of flagging system. And I can see it if this thing is actually somehow integrated with the health checks that Kubernetes provide as part of health probes. And then we actually, on basis of health probes, we can define, do we actually need to turn this feature on and off? That is going to be a really magic word going forward, because I think health checks actually uh, give you this kind of flexibility, so you can actually tap into this and write more stuff. So I think these are the things I really like to see in the future as well. And also there's a community. I think this is one of the two features I'm actually looking at it, but I believe as more and more conversations started, we have ton and more places where open features can best fit in. So I think that is where we need to research more on, and that's where community and the discussion started. So I definitely encourage people to go into the resources and check it out, especially in the community side, like what you need to see in the ecosystem as well. So before I let go everybody, so let's give you some resources for your afterward. First of all, you go to openfeature.dev and go to that website. Is actually give you, this is the open feature website where all the documentation and all this data is listed. And then you go to the GitHub repository, github.com/open feature. You can read the spec community, all the detail is available. We have a Twitter handle for the open feature, and that is basically to give you weekly updates around what happening. And then there's a doc, and that doc is actually inspiring for me because it's not a very old project, but it's very very reflecting and very very educational. So please go check that out as well. And you're thinking about who's how and when is actually open feature started. And when it's actually donated as part of the CNCF Sandbox project. Go to that link, give you the full detail of what Open Features does and how it's actually started. And then there's a Medium article I really like about while I'm reading it. There's an ultimate feature flag getting started guide. It's give you the highlighted tour of, if you don't know what the feature flag is, then this blog is for you. And another one is actually especially on the same lines. What feature flag does is, if you're completely new to this topic, and then there's some deep dive content available on the internet for the feature flagging. And if you are going to the KubeCon Amsterdam, Adam will be there and he will convince you, I believe, 100% convince you that you need to be use open feature in your current setup. And there's a playground and a few more that we actually showed today. I will share the link in the YouTube so you can chat more about it. But definitely, it's been a wonderful demos. This is the second time Adam appear on the Cloud Native Islamabad. But as always, I really enjoyed the talk. I hope you always like his teaching style as well. So thank you, Adam. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Not at all.
Believe
Thank you for
your
having me.
30 or your 40 plus minute is actually convince your 40 plus minute actually convinced me.
Oh, you dropped out there, but I heard it convinced me, and that
Yes,
is
I,
job done for
you're
me.
saying you are saying something.
No, awesome. Thank you very much for having me, and yeah, thank you everyone, and yeah,
Yes,
reach out to the community.
yes,
There's a bit of
absolutely,
a delay
absolutely.
on this.
Absolutely. I